So we can talk about like how, because I suspect that each of us have the same top four, but there might be like permutations in how we order them. So we can get into that. We can each go in descending order from who we have at the top. Make our arguments for whoever we like the best.
If we have any shockers in our top three, that'll be kind of like
No. We all have the same players in our top fours in different order, probably.
Are you sure? Top four? Top three?
You have Shaedon Sharpe in the top four?
Well, should we wait until we
Yeah, no. Okay, we shouldn't talk about it now. Okay. Damn, all right.
All right, give me an intro. No, I'm kidding. All right,
we don't do intros, bro. No. So useless. Okay, does someone want to start with their number one player?
I'm waiting for you guys. I'm the guest.
Take it away.
All right, I have Chet Holmgren as my number one player. We saw even at the beginning of the season that he has the ability to shoot threes, but my question was, will he be able to shoot them in more difficult situations where defenders are closing out to him more quickly? He has less time to shoot them, and kind of see like just the overall difficulty of the threes that he gets into. About 10 games into the season, he was shooting in the mid 30s, maybe 36%. And since then it's risen to 43%, which is super impressive for somebody as tall as he is. And even when he was shooting a respectable 36%, just about through 10 or so games, I did again still have questions about, whether his slower release would translate well to the next level. And I've since seen development not only in his efficiency, but also his release, especially on his spot ups. Gonzaga uses him in a lot of spot up situations where he's, not necessarily the main player in a particular action, but he sort of finds open space on the perimeter, shuffles a little bit to maintain space between himself and other players. He has good awareness for that. And, one thing I realized was he doesn't, it's not a reasonable expectation that he's going to be able to fire away so quickly like some of the guards in today's NBA. He's 7 feet tall. He's a legit 7 foot. He's got like a 7'4" wingspan. He's not going to have issues getting it off at the next level.
Yeah, so for me, I have Chet number one as well. Jacob and I have talked about this a lot. And I just think that he's the easiest player out of anyone in the top four in that kind of upper tier talent level in this draft class to project into an NBA role. It's just very clear that he fits in as a rim protector, a versatile defender that can switch onto wings if needed. He's a very talented shot blocker. He can hit trailer threes. He's actually been taking even since the beginning of the season, he's been taking the ball down the court in transition if he gets a defensive rebound, and he'll take the three if you give him a cushion in semi-transition. So that adds a dynamic to his offense because he's so good at finding cutters when there's space, whether it's out of the post, whether it's from the top of the key. There's a lot of kind of schematic diversity to what you can do with him offensively because of his passing ability. I think he's the best passer out of any of the bigs in this draft. I think he's a better passer than Paolo, more natural moving without the ball than Paolo or Jabari. He doesn't need to dominate the ball in order to have an impact offensively because of the fact that he spaces the court both vertically as a lob catcher and horizontally as a shooter. And, even if he doesn't project as a number one option, I don't think that's necessarily what you're going to get out of this draft, because I don't think that either Paolo or Jabari are the level of prospects where it's just a no-brainer to project them as a first as an alpha at the NBA level on a good team. I don't think that that's a guarantee for for Jabari at all. I think he has a better chance of growing into that than Paolo, but Paolo is sort of a ball dominant offensive hub for maybe a lower quality or a lower ceiling offense at the NBA level. So I just think that with Chet, you have the best opportunity to build a high quality offense around him, and he can be, your third or fourth best offensive player. And the defensive value that he brings just raises the ceiling of that team so much more. My question for you guys is, do you think he projects as a better defender than Kristaps Porzingis?
Yes.
More mobile. I mean, I feel like this is no surprise, but I have Chet as well, number one. And I've felt that way without any wavering now for a while. And it's for all of the reasons you said. I mean, it's the skill set, it's the size, it's the sort of the sure thingness of it. The trail three answered a lot of questions for me. And also, I think it's the toughness as well, because I think if I were to describe to you the player type and give the height, give the weight, you'd probably hear a lot of the same criticisms as we heard about Kristaps, which is always too soft, which is sort of a narrative that we're moving away from, the Euro white guy soft, but he's pretty unusually tough, I think, and a clear competitor. My question is, he plays with my number 2 guy on my draft board, Drew Timme. No, he plays with Drew Timme a lot, and although we're seeing success in the NBA more so this year with 2 big lineups, what do you think would he be best in single center lineups as a roll man, pick and pop guy, or does his value also lie in his ability to play with another pick and roll guy or another rim running guy, or even a post guy?
Yeah, well, one thing that's striking to me is he's got like a 72% true shooting percentage this year. I mean, that is, I think actually Draft Express mentioned that was like the 3rd best true shooting percentage in all of college basketball this year. I mean, so Gonzaga is taking, they are positioning him in ways that are clearly optimal for his scoring, or else I don't think his efficiency would be that good. So as for your question about how he'll fit either as the only center in the lineup or with another big, I think this is telling us that he fits well with another big man, especially considering like he's relatively more mobile for a big, quote unquote. He's got these guard skills that we've mentioned that kind of cover up for, say, if you were to put 2 traditional big men in the same lineup. I don't think you would feel as comfortable doing that because of their limitations on the perimeter, which Chet kind of covers up for. So I think the way the roster is constructed right now and the way he's scoring the ball, I think is a really good indication that he's going to fit really well with another sort of traditional big man in any lineup that he plays in the NBA.
Yeah, I think you're also seeing at the NBA level that, I mean, there are a couple teams this year, kind of partially as a byproduct of the difference in officiating, with how they're putting an emphasis on allowing vertical contests and, maybe not calling those types of ticky-tack fouls where someone uses a rip-through move when they're going up for a shot. I think it allows bigs to stay on the court, and you're seeing, a number of different teams having success with double big lineups, as long as both bigs are defensively capable. One of them is switchable and one of them can space the floor. It doesn't even have to be all the way out to 3. I mean, so with Cleveland, Mobley isn't a 3-point shooter, but he has a mid-range shot and he can handle the ball a little bit, and he's a good passer.
I have to jump in because I think the success that Mobley has had has been to Chet's advantage, at least in the perception of a lot of people. I think, I read a lot of John Hollinger on The Athletic, and I remember last draft, every time he was talking about centers, both in the free agent market and drafting, and just talking about how replaceable centers are. And so I think before we saw the success of Mobley and others this year, that was a knock against Chet. But I'd say I would push back against that a little bit because I think Mobley has really unusual foot speed for someone of that size. I don't think it's comparable to Chet. I mean, Mobley moves like a guard. He really does, like a young KG.
Yeah, that's the knock. That's one knock that I have against Chet as well. Is I just don't think, Gonzaga is back to the spot up situations, because I've noticed Gonzaga is using him in a lot of spot ups, and if he's going to be successful in those situations, he not only has to be able to stretch it out and shoot it, but he's got to be able to attack closeouts pretty effectively. And one knock I have against him is either he's not making decisions quickly enough when he does get a hard closeout, or the foot speed is just not quite there. Say he, wants to pump fake off of a hard closeout and do his little sidestep that he likes to go to. I think that could be sped up. I think, deciding whether to do that or to get straight downhill off of the closeout is another thing that he should really focus on going to the next level. So I have questions about really his quickness and his linear speed, particularly in that situation when he has to attack closeouts, because that's going to make him a complete shooter. To this point in the season, that's such a huge case for why he should be the number one pick. He's shooting 43% from three. In order for him to really make that a complete skill at the next level, he has to be able to do both.
But I think that maybe we're placing too much of a premium on being able to, to play next to a traditional 7-footer, when I think that if you surround Chet with 4 skilled perimeter players that can pass and penetrate and create opportunities to play make for Chet, then you maximize him offensively. And, you could easily play him without another big at all. Just a small ball lineup with 3 wings and a point guard, and be able to get the most out of Chet. I think that you can play Chet with an undersized big like a Brandon Clark that doesn't necessarily space the floor but can defend multiple positions and kind of be another lob threat and cutter to be a release valve for Chet if he posts up and he gets doubled.
He's such a great lob target.
Yeah, he's a great lob target and a great and a great passer out of the short roll, theoretically out of the short roll. Not that we've seen that much with Gonzaga, but out of the post. And I just think that with his shooting, you can play him with a non-shooter as long as they can guard. That to me is more important than being able to play him with a 7-footer with both the spacing and perimeter defensive limitations. So maybe you can't play him with a Steven Adams, but you can play him with a Bobby Portis,
a Şengün,
an Alperen Şengün.
I think unless someone has an incredible end to the season, I think things will stay in a bit of flux. I think fit will come into play with these top 3 guys. And that's the thing that Jabari has that the others don't. I suppose Paolo has it as well, but I think Jabari has it the most, which is it really doesn't matter what situation he's coming into. He slides in right away. I don't want to see Chet play with Christian Wood. I'll probably take my eyes out with a spoon if I have to watch that for more than 20 games. But I think if I was a GM, regardless, I would pick Chet first, because I think the value is that much greater than either Paolo or Jabari. Should we get into our 2?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Jabari, and he is actually my number 2. I thought more highly of Jaden Ivey about 10 games in, but looking at the way that Jabari is able to create at his size from the perimeter is just extremely unique. Auburn is like a top 10 team in the country right now, and I think Jabari's got like a 20. I think Jabari's like plus 26 according to Basketball Reference, which is pretty close to Chet. Chet is like plus 30 something crazy like that. And the shooting is just so impressive to me. I think he's shooting at least 40% from three this year as well on a good amount of volume. And these are not all catch and shoot, pick and pop type. He's getting into hang hesitations. He's shooting off the dribble. These are like really advanced looks. It just looks like, the way he shoots will translate to the NBA super nicely. I have questions about his finishing. His 2-point percentage is not amazing, but again, the shooting is really impressive. I think the finishing will get better with time. I think the gaps in, the tight gaps in college have maybe gotten in the way of his finishing a little bit, his ability to get all the way downhill. He's a willing passer. He's not very advanced, but he makes pretty good decisions on a consistent basis. And his length and his coordination, he seems coordinated on the defensive end. Not crazy defensive numbers like Chet or anything, but he gets the job done on that end. I think he's going to be a positive.
Yeah, I agree with that entire assessment. I think still, though, Paolo is in my eyes a superior prospect because of the certainty of his scoring at the next level, because he puts so much pressure on the rim, because he's such a good interior scorer, so strong, so powerful, and I'm convinced to a certain extent by the shot. I think he's like 34 or something from three, but he shoots well from the free throw line, so it's a good indicator. But someone who puts that amount of pressure on the rim, who handles the ball like he does at his size, I don't see how he's not a 20 plus per game scorer. And even if the other stuff, the question marks, don't reveal themselves to be positives, if he really is a bit of a liability defensively, although again, with his size and his strength, I think he can figure it out as long as he, grasps the schemes that are thrown at him. I don't want to jump the line, but I have Jabari 3 for all of the reasons that you just said. I think it's just the how sure I am that that Paolo is going to be an elite scorer that gives him the edge. And there's just certain moments where I've watched Jabari where the lack of finishing, getting pushed off his spots, it just makes me a little bit uneasy. And I don't have that same uneasiness with Paolo, even though I think his upside may be slightly, his best case scenario may be slightly less.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the sentiment that Jabari has the highest theoretical ceiling out of probably any of these guys, just because the shooting is so clearly there. He's a tough shot maker. We've seen him do it out of the post. We've seen him do it off the dribble, out of the triple threat. But, and in terms of his physical tools, the defensive potential is certainly higher than Paolo. He has a better motor. He really seems to care and put in a lot of effort. He shows a lot of grit and determination. But for me, the over-reliance on the triple threat rise up over a smaller defender jump shot, and in fairness, it goes in, and it's been an effective way for him to be the leading scorer on what many people consider to be the best team in the nation. But the 2-point percentage is 10 points lower than Paolo on significantly lower volume. And, to me, early on in the season, my concern with Paolo, like I was saying before, is that, you have a guy that is clearly going to be an NBA level scorer. I think it's, he's certainly going to be able to average 20 plus points per game at the NBA level. But how efficient are those 20 points going to be? Because he's not an extremely transcendent athlete, even though he's 6'10", 250 pounds. He has an NBA build, and he can overpower guys with bully ball and just I'm going to get to the rim. If I miss, I'm going to offensive rebounds and just clear out space with the broad shoulders. So I think that there's some of that might not translate with Paolo, but the isolation scoring repertoire is so much more diverse than it is with Jabari. And he's just able to put pressure on the rim. The spot up jump shot has been, from the corner has been coming along as of the last 7 games or so. He's, I think, clearly better at making like basic reads on a consistent basis as a passer than Jabari, just because the handle is more advanced. He's not as tunnel visioned on the basket. And, he will reliably find, open shooters. I just have more confidence with his offensive game panning out. It's a lot, again, it's kind of the same idea with Chet, that it's just a lot safer than Jabari. So we could easily end up being wrong, and Jabari just maximizes his ceiling and really improves as a shot creator and as as an on-ball scoring option. But I'm just, that is never a certainty with guys. So I hesitate to project Jabari out to what I hope he's going to become.
What do you guys say about the fact that, I mean, it's not a huge difference, but Duke's got a bunch of NBA caliber players this year. They've got, besides Paolo, Wendell Moore, AJ Griffin now is really turning it up. I'm excited to see what else he does this year. Mark Williams. What do you guys think about the fact that Duke is just, Paolo seems to have a better supporting cast than Jabari at this point, yet Auburn's got the 8th best net rating in the country. Duke's got the 10th best, I believe. It's not a huge margin, but just curious about your thoughts.
I say on paper, maybe. The Auburn guards are really good college players, even if, they don't project as well. And then Kessler is unbelievable rim protector, which I think makes up for a lot of people's mistakes defensively. If you have someone who's, that level of rim protector, from what I've seen, I think more Duke guys have better draft equity, but I wouldn't say that Paolo has benefited more from his supporting cast than Jabari. If anything, maybe Paolo would be impressing more if he was playing with lesser talent and his usage was that much higher. Because I do feel like when he's scoring, 17, 18 points in a game, if he just got 10 more touches, the numbers would be slightly more impressive and the national conversation would be slightly different.
Yeah, it just seems like there's more of an inevitability with Paolo's scoring. Like if you give him, that if you give him those touches that he's going to produce. And with Jabari, like Jabari actually plays with probably better shooters and maybe like more kind of experienced playmakers than Paolo. Obviously, Keels, Moore, Williams, and Griffin all project to be, maybe first round picks, all of them, with the exception of Williams, perhaps. But Keels has had a pretty rough shooting year. I think Moore has actually been the best player on Duke, probably. Yeah. But with Paolo, it's a lot more. It actually speaks to kind of a philosophical or an existential concern with Paolo's style of offensive play that, even if he does play next to great creators, is that really going to is playing next to other great offensive players going to upscale his efficiency? Or is he just kind of the same level of producer regardless of who you have him next to? Because
that's my concern.
Because he's always going to be an isolation face-up style player.
Would both of you, would you classify him as a ball stopper? Like, do you think he's a player who puts a limit on the fluidity of an offense? Or
no, I my opinion of his ability to make his teammates better and his passing, that's been the biggest shift for me. I actually am impressed with Paolo's passing. An opinion that I had to start the season was that he tends to be a ball stopper, like you said. He's not a very advanced passer to make up for it. When he does decide to do that, but I've seen him make some very impressive passes actually, mainly out of the post, some on his drives or when he's attacking a closeout. To me, a big tell about whether somebody is going to be, a great passer, an above average passer, is their ability to use deception. I've seen a couple times where he'll identify the critical help defender on a particular play and look them off at just the right time to, make the right decision, either dump it off to somebody in the dunker spot or hit somebody in the corner. He has that. He can be an above average passer at the next level. The 3-point shot is a question mark for me. He's shooting, like you said, he's shooting 34% this year. I feel like his mechanics are not conducive to him improving much further than he's currently shooting right now at the next level. That's a question for me. Jabari is clearly better from out there. And Jabari also has a solid mid-range game. Like he doesn't get slowed down by the ball. He has the ability to raise up super quickly in the mid-range. And again, I think Jabari will benefit from more spacing. I don't think he's going to be used quite as he's being used right now with Auburn. Bruce Pearl, I believe, is the coach. Yeah, he's putting a lot of trust into Jabari to kind of be the alpha and create for the rest of the team. But I think with the spacing at the next level, I think Jabari is going to get all the way downhill with a little more ease, and he's not going to have to create everything by himself, which I think has implications for again his improvement at the rim.
Yeah. Wait, so Milo, you had Paolo, Jabari 2-3.
Yes.
Who did you have 3, Danny?
So I actually have Ivey 3. I mean, I guess I can get into why.
I have Ivey 3 too.
Okay.
Oh, you have Ivey? Okay, sorry.
Milo, do you want? I was talking for a while, so I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So actually, I think that what the thing about this is interesting that we have Danny, we have the same top 4 except we swapped Paolo and Jabari. I'm really concerned about the number of different ways that you can. I mean, because I kind of raised the point about maybe Paolo is the same type of player regardless of who you surround him with. I think maybe Jabari is the same type of player because of his limitations as a ball handler. Like, I think that there's a world in which Jabari just tops out as a pure spot up shooter.
I agree.
Because I really don't see the ability to make decisions quickly and use his handle to attack open space. And I think that as a scorer, if you're going to use your gravity as a shooter to create for yourself, you have to be able to make decisions quickly off the catch. You have to be able to use movement to flow into open space in the mid-range or get downhill. And I haven't seen that from Jabari. He seems a little bit stiff with the ball. I think that's why he doesn't often blow past people, even though he is a superior athlete to Paolo in terms of quickness. But it's just, he often gets kind of held up as a driver where he has to resort to posting up, backing a guy down, and then taking a tough fadeaway. And I just see that too much for my liking. He's very reliant on that tough shot making ability, and it's not efficient from 2-point range. So again, it's about what's teachable and in what time frame, because I think that it's easier for Ivey to develop as a pick and roll playmaker. And we've already seen how electric he is getting downhill off of screens, how he can just blow past people to his left and get all the way to the rim. We've seen the acrobatic finishing. We've seen flashes of, the step back 3, the ability to create from outside. The mid-range creation is obviously a concern for me, but I think that he's a very instinctive passer in terms of court mapping. He always seems to know where his teammates are on the court. He's very good at finding those bailout options if he gets out of control. So even though he takes risks in terms of just barreling his way to the rim, just shooting himself out of a cannon. And sometimes he gets stuck. He seems to always know how to kind of bail out the possession by finding a shooter, or just kicking it out to someone who can reset. I think that with Ivey, you have one of the best athletes at his size that we've seen come out of college since John Wall, Russell Westbrook. I mean, I can't remember a guy with this level of speed and just ability to get by people in the open court. Like the way he pushes the ball in transition, you're not going to stop him from getting all the way across the rim, the reverse layups. There's such a high ceiling as a primary or secondary creator. I think that you can fit him in a number of different lineup configurations because of his shooting, because of his off-ball movement, and because of the defensive ability. He's one of the better shot blockers at the shooting guard position that I've seen in a long time. And so I just think that there's not really any glaring weakness outside of the mid-range game. And I think that in terms of making more advanced reads and developing as a shot maker, those are things that are teachable as long as you get reps. And I think that, with his ability to space the floor, shoot off of movement, and really put pressure on the rim, both in the half court and in transition, he's absolutely going to get those reps.
I know you didn't say this, but I've heard the Morant comparison a lot, which it seems to be, to me, is based almost entirely off the explosiveness, because Ivey is very clearly not the passer that Morant is, not nearly as instinctive, not nearly as fluid as a player. And so I have Ivey 5. I can talk about 4 in a little, but I think it is, I am semi-convinced by the 3-point shooting, but if he does not improve as a mid-range shooter, if he does not improve the in-between game, and he's not as gifted of a passer as some of the other guards in the league, I guess really this is forming into a question, which is, what do you see his most likely outcome as? Like, what role would he play ideally if we don't see, crazy development, just sort of median development? What role does he play?
So I'm going to let Danny speak to that. But before I do, I want to say that I think that, so the reason I have Ivey above Jabari is because I think it's more likely for him to get, so I think the median outcome for Jabari is higher because it's easier to develop a player as a pick and roll playmaker. And it's the mid-range shot creation is a thing that, even replacement level players tend to develop at the NBA level. I think that's not, I don't necessarily see Ivey as a primary alpha. I think maybe that is a upper quartile outcome for him. I think it's possible. I don't necessarily think it's the most likely scenario, but I think that there are more contingencies. There's more things that have to go right for Jabari to be an apex predator type offensive player than for Ivey to be an extremely valuable secondary playmaker who can get to the rim, who can be a valuable passer and who can shoot off the catch and off the dribble. I just think that the translatable NBA level skills are closer to being there for Ivey than they are for Jabari.
How much do you guys value I know it's not a huge age gap, but Jabari is 18. I think Ivey is turning 20 very soon. I mean, how much do you guys value that? Because just imagining what Jabari would do with maybe another year in college and see where they would be at the same stage.
Yeah, I think it's not the age thing so much as it is the experience thing. And I think it's massive. I mean, a year in college is look at some players, let's think, like Davis, for instance. Think about all the players, second year players over the last few years who, really rose their stock, and apply that to Jabari. And also, I think Ivey was the lead guy for the USA team too, which I think is probably did a lot for his development. Yeah, that's why, and that's why I think Jabari and even Paolo to a certain extent are owed something. It's sort of the benefit of the doubt on certain things that maybe going into, their rookie year and moving forward, we can give them a bit of a development bump. But
Yeah.
Ivey's incredible, and the explosiveness is so undeniable. And I don't see how he fails at the NBA level. I just maybe don't see the boom potential as much as you guys.
Make the case for Ivey over Paolo, because I spoke to Ivey over Jabari, but it's kind of a different argument when you're comparing it to a guy that seems like a pretty sure thing as an NBA scorer.
Yeah. And Danny, I have another question. You have Ivey over Paolo, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess my argument against that is you need creation. Like, you need an offensive engine as at playing, as a point guard, right? Like that, you need that. But if you can sneak a few more of them in at other positions and have them guard bigs like Paolo, like an offensive engine, and you say you're somewhat convinced by his passing development too. So I guess bearing that in mind, even if you think Ivey has a higher upside than Paolo, do you not feel like there's a certain positional argument to be made for Paolo if they're comparable in terms of their efficiency and production?
I think even given the times that I have seen Paolo make some pretty advanced passes, I do feel like he does force up shots in certain situations where it's pretty clearly not the right decision. I mean, it's just when we're talking about like the top players in the draft, I don't think he's necessarily a ball stopper, but his shot selection, I would expect it to be better, especially because he does have like a really good supporting cast. I don't know what he's shooting in the mid range, but sometimes he settles for fadeaways in the post where it's not. He could try and get to the middle and allow the defense to collapse, or drive baseline and make heads turn. Like, it's very hard for me to talk about it without showing certain plays, but I think Ivey's playmaking will scale up despite his assist numbers maybe not being as impressive as they are now. And I even don't totally agree with Milo's assessment that, mid-range shooting is something that can be so easily developed. I don't even expect Ivey's mid-range shooting to ever develop into something that can really be impactful at the next level. With guys that don't even have the ability to access a higher release point, a higher lift point, which he doesn't do, he really tries to, force up his mid-range shots from down close to his forehead, which is not something that tends to be conducive to effective mid-range shooting. I'm not even expecting him to improve in that aspect of his game. I think the shot selection is a concern with Paolo, and I mean, Ivey has clearly been a more efficient scorer than Paolo, mainly because of the 3-point shooting again, which I really didn't expect Ivey to be this good at shooting, but he has sustained this throughout 20 games.
Yeah, I think I want to see the Paolo, mid-range numbers. Paolo is shooting 54 from 2, and most of it at the rim. But
Milo and I also had a conversation about his finishing earlier this year. He doesn't have a ton of finesse to his finishing. It's kind of like bully ball. I know he's pretty effective at the rim, actually really effective at the rim in college, but I think he's going to need a little bit more finesse at the next level, where he's going to have more physical defenders guarding him.
A concern that I have with Paolo is how good is he going to be as a roll man and as a dump off, like catch and finish guy, because he really doesn't, he's not good at accounting for like where the help defense is coming from and kind of finding that open space or that the perfect angle to finish at. He's not super ambidextrous either. And he gets like, even though he has great size and physicality, he gets kind of bothered by vertical contests at the rim. And he's not going to just, he's not an above the rim finisher in traffic. So I think that the finishing out of the pick and roll is a question for me in terms of how that scales to the NBA level. And if it doesn't, then he's kind of shoehorned into that like traditional post up banging in the low block or facing up and taking tough contested mid-range shots kind of guy. And then how efficient can that really be? And does that scale playing next to great players? So yeah,
I disagree. I mean, I don't, you didn't make a statement, but I think that's not something worth, I suppose, dwelling on, because I think one of the products of the NBA evolving in the way that it has and becoming positionless and no longer having, two big men on the court for most of the time is that big play. Like, it's why Julius Randle was so successful last season, because if you are a bully, if you have size, if you have strength, you don't have Rodman and Bill Cartwright down there with their hands up knocking you to your ass. You're being guarded by Brandon Clark. Like, I think people are overthinking it a bit with Paolo. He's going to have a physical advantage over nearly everyone who guards him. And I think the role man question is not super relevant, because I don't think that's the type of player he is. I think he's an initiator or a secondary initiator. And I don't see, like, with his, what do you, Danny, you're a skills trainer. What's the half jab and then full jab?
I don't know, just like a double jab.
No, not like the double jab, like the hesitation jab, and like he does it almost every time he faces up.
On second thought, I actually don't think the fact that he doesn't have a ton of finesse at the rim is that much of a concern for me. It's mainly the shot selection, and when we're comparing him to Ivey, I think Ivey's playmaking, despite again what the assist number shows, that his passing will scale up at the next level. I think he's gonna. I'm actually surprised that Purdue doesn't use him more as like the main shot creator on the team. He doesn't have very high usage, where Paolo's usage is. I think Paolo's usage is higher. I'm not sure how much higher than Ivey's, but I think Ivey also has that going for him. That his usage is he's not being used as much as Paolo in their respective offenses, and for those reasons, I just think Ivey's playmaking will scale up, and I actually do think in the times where they do pass, Ivey is making some very advanced reads as well. He may be a little bit out of control at times, which I've started to see that as they've gone into conference play a little bit more. That wasn't a concern for me through 10 games. He looked very under control. I think Ivey's playmaking will be better, and he will have more playmaking responsibilities at the next level.
The thing for me with Paolo's finishing, and the reason I put an emphasis on it, is because, I mean, think about the way that Jason Tatum, for example, the way that he struggles to be efficient at the rim. It's because he's not a guy that's necessarily going to beat you with his quickness. He's not going to blow past you to the point where he's just able to get a wide open layup. He's not going to finish over the top of you, over the top of the help defender. And so unless you're just like if you're playing the four, the way Paolo is going to at the NBA level, and the way that Tatum does, NBA teams are going to know that they need to put someone on him that has the size to bang with him in the post. His handle is very advanced for a guy his size, but it's not at the level where he can really just shake guys off of him and get uncontested shots at the rim. And so I think it limits the number of ways that you can use him if he's not really able to get efficient looks as a finisher being set up by guards and other passers. If he's not able to be a super efficient finisher off the catch.
I can't think of many players who match up to him physically. Like maybe OG, maybe Scotty Barnes. Crazy they're on the same team. And Tatum, he's not slight anymore, but he's not the same sort of, he doesn't have the same sort of body. He doesn't have the same sort of strength. I don't know. I think I know it sounds like the way I'm talking about Paolo sounds like he's my number one, but just I think the physical profile and the skill, it's unguardable. I really think it is. And maybe he won't be efficient immediately, but I think with time, with the development, he's still so young. He's going to be a great scorer, and I think he'll be an efficient scorer. And it is a testament, I think, to Chet's all around upside that he still maintains the number one in the face of that.
All right. I think we should move on to talking about guys outside of this upper echelon, because this is kind of where it gets interesting and where there's going to be the most variability between our big boards.
Well, first I have to say that I had Ivey 5 and I have Sharpe at 4. And the reason I'm hesitant to put Sharpe higher, even though I was inclined to, is just the elephant in the room, which is the lack of tape and lack of high level opposition. But as far as the type of player he is, the explosiveness, the size, the shooting, the EYBL numbers are really good as well, which can be misleading, of course. It sounds a little crazy, but I always love when a high school prospect, a number one guy, top 5 guy, kind of comes out of nowhere, because what that says to me is it's not the sort of the Amani Bates effect of, a player being very hyped and then despite the fact that they're not as effective and they don't look quite as good in comparison to their peers as times past, they still maintain their ranking. I think Sharpe's number one ranking in high school is entirely merit and entirely the sort of player that he is. And I'm just so convinced that, and despite what might happen at Kentucky, and Milo, we were talking about it, like what I think Sharpe shouldn't play, honestly, just because he can only lower his stock. But
not really any reason for him to take the risk of coming out, being in a system that he hasn't had time to become integrated with, and then, just not getting the opportunities to actually be an efficient offensive player.
It would be really, really silly, but especially because if you watch anything on him, you come away impressed. There are not many holes there. And I think that's what makes him so appealing in this draft class, when we have a lot of top prospects with evident holes, that there's this player who really doesn't have any glaring weaknesses. Of course, those might reveal themselves in time, but I don't know. I'm really, really bullish on him.
Okay, but we're talking in abstractions. Make the case for Shaedon Sharpe. Tell me what you think his, high end, median, low end sort of outcomes are. Who would you compare him to? Just tell me what kind of player you think he's going to be.
I mean, I hate to talk about highlights, because I could make the argument that Ryan Hollins is the greatest player of all time based on highlights, or that Milo Schindler is the greatest player of all time based on highlights. But when you watch some of what he's able to do, like drop step dunk on a high school defender's head, and then hit a deep step back. I mean, he's just, I think he's what Jaden Hardy thinks he is. He's like Jaden Hardy if Jaden Hardy was stronger and smarter and better. And not to shit on Jaden Hardy, he had a really good game recently, but
anyway. He got 13 for 18 from the field last night.
Yeah, because he knew we were shitting on him a couple days ago. He had to pull it out. But no, I think it's such a shame that Sharpe is in this situation, because I would have loved to see him play in college.
Yeah, Shaedon Sharpe is like if you put Cam Thomas in rookie Kobe Bryant's body
and wrapped him up in a Michael Jordan's skin and then shook him. No, okay. This has gotten ridiculous. Okay. 5, I have Ivey. 6, I have Mathurin. 7, I have AJ Griffin.
Oh,
You have
Should I go all the way to 10 or should we take a break?
I was
keep going.
Mathurin was like on the border of my top 10, but keep going.
Okay, and then 8, I have Johnny Davis. 10, TyTy Washington, and then 9, TyTy Washington. I don't want to say my 10 yet because I know you guys you're not gonna be pleased with it. But just to very quickly give my Mathurin over Griffin take is, I think, Griffin's bigger, Griffin's stronger, but when I think about their role at the next level, they're both versatile wings who are 3-and-D guys. And despite the fact that Griffin is, I think, owed a slight bump from coming back from an injury, from being a freshman, Mathurin's numbers are undeniable. He is an elite shooter, and he's shown it. There's a really good sample size, and then the eye test as well. He's an elite athlete, and he's strong, and he has size, and I just can't in good conscience put him below Griffin. And because of the value of big wings, or I'm not sure I would call him a big wing, but because of the value of players who are as versatile as he is, I put him over Davis and Washington as well, who I think are more limited in where they can slide in.
Totally agree with that assessment. I have Shaedon Sharpe 5 and Mathurin 6. There's a big difference between being a spot-up shooter, and Milo and I talked about this in our first episode. There's a difference between shooting at a particular percentage when you're the beneficiary of other people's playmaking and being stationary versus coming off screens and shooting, moving in all kinds of different directions. And Mathurin has shown the ability to do that. He does it on a good chunk of his attempts. And I actually am really starting to like AJ Griffin, but I want to see a little bit more from him. He's not even in my top 10, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got selected into the top 10 and he shows really, really nice flashes. Not just being a 3-and-D player. I've seen him do some really impressive stuff with the ball, creating his own shot. I just need to see more from him before I jump to that. So after Mathurin, I have Jalen Duren 7, Keegan Murray 8, Johnny Davis 9, and TyTy Washington 10. I have Jalen Duren that high because I don't think he necessarily needs to be all that skilled on offense for him to carve out a role at the next level. He's a really good rim protector, and there's a difference between getting a lot of blocks and like actually covering for teammates and being a very impactful rim protector. Duren is the latter. He's very mobile. He's not somebody like Whiteside that, if you put him in a drop coverage, he's going to look lost a lot of the time. He's super mobile and has good defensive awareness, and on top of that has the ability to alter shots and block shots. He's averaging 2.5 blocks per game, around 4 blocks per 100 possessions, maybe more than that. He's going to be very valuable on that end, and he's 18 years old. And I know the free throws are a concern. He really doesn't have the ability to shoot past like 3 or 5 feet from the rim. But just given how much NBA teams rely on the pick and roll and how many good playmakers there are, I think he's gonna just carve a role as a pick and roll finisher and somebody you can dump it off to on drives in the dunker spot. He's gonna shoot 65, 70% at the rim. And I don't think he's going to go to the line as much at the next level either. His bad free throw shooting is not going to have as much weight.
I don't want to rush you, but I the Murray thing, I just don't understand. I just don't understand. So I want to know what you see there. Like, do you buy the shooting? Do you This isn't 1988, but the position, he's a tweener. No, but like the positional thing is a concern. Like what do you see?
I know. So he posts up a ton and he's not big like his scoring, it's actually like if Evan Mobley was like 4 inches shorter. That's kind of how I view his scoring, but it's just it's very hard for me to ignore the numbers that he's put up and the efficiency that he scored at. I think his true shooting percentage is like 61%. I would like to see sort of a tactical adjustment where he's not posting up as much. He does have the ability to beat people off the dribble from the perimeter. It's his handle doesn't look all that fluid or pretty, kind of like Mobley's handle, but he just kind of gets the job done. What is he, 20 or 21 years old? I can't ignore the fact that he's the leading scorer right now, and he's been very efficient.
For me, with Murray, it's not so much that I think he's going to be this level. I mean, clearly he's not going to be this level of a scorer in the NBA, but it's the defensive potential. I think that he, as a small ball 4, and even in some lineups as a small ball 5, can create a lot of chaos defensively. He's a very good on-ball defender. He can guard multiple positions. He's a good shot blocker. He creates a lot of turnovers. He's very good in transition. And I do think the shooting will come around eventually. I think that he's like a 78% free throw shooter on high attempts. He's been 35% from 3 on actually a pretty decent sample size this season. He's played 20 games and he takes like almost 5 of them per game. I've seen him hit it off the dribble. I think that there's a lot of teams that can use a guy that guards multiple positions, can hit a spot up 3, and can attack mismatches and score in a variety of ways with a smaller defender on him. Even if he's not gonna do that against Pascal Siakam, who I think is an interesting comparison for him, even though he's not the level of athlete or playmaker, obviously, but Siakam also wasn't that at the same age. I just think that, in line with the point you were making before about how the era of small ball and pace and space and positionless basketball has given, these types of physical players that are able to hunt high leverage shots at the basket, they have an advantage because there's a lot more of those smaller shooters or more skill oriented players who can't match up defensively. And I think that Murray can attack those types of matchups. So I don't think that he's a 20 point per game scorer, but I think that he's a massive plus defensively. I think that the scoring will come around. So I'm pretty high on him. I have him 9.
Milo, who did you have after your top tier?
So I have Shaedon Sharpe 5. I think that the ceiling is probably the highest out of anybody in this draft, but for the same reasons you mentioned, I also think he's a better passer than I think you think he is. I think he is the only player in this draft with transcendent apex predator potential, and the defensive impact is there. It is kind of similar to Jaden Hardy stylistically, but with the size, him being probably 3 inches taller, a lot more athletic as a leaper, a lot more just the energy level defensively, the motor, the finishing. It seems like he has a better decision-making mind in terms of knowing when to hunt his own shot and when to back off and let others create or set his teammates up. But I just can't put him over guys that we've seen produce at an extremely high level in college when there's basically no ability to scout like full games with him. So it's just tough for me without the sample size and with the uncertainties. I think Brandon Boston was like projected to be a top 5 or top 10 pick last year, and he ended up going in like the second round. When you see these players against a higher level of competition, you can start to see where some of the weaknesses lie, and we just haven't had that luxury with Sharpe. But I still think that the talent level, he has to be a top 5 pick. Beyond that, I actually had Griffin 6. It's kind of a case where the median outcome or the most likely outcome is a very valuable role player, but the high end outcome is like a second option on a very high level offense to me. And I think that the defensive potential is a lot higher than it is with Mathurin or with Johnny Davis or even with Ivey, just because he's so physical. For a guy, he's like 18 years. I think he's going to be 18 when he's drafted, and he's like 6'6", 220, which is like Jimmy Butler size in an 18-year-old who's shooting 46% from three and can create his shot off the dribble from 3-point range, from mid range. He gets to he knows how to get to the rim. The skill level as a scorer, I think, is from the perimeter is the highest in this draft. Johnny Davis is probably a tougher shot maker, but Griffin just is able to create separation and get comfortable looks seemingly whenever he wants to. So like when you look at what the most likely and the most favorable outcomes are, they're both higher for me than a guy like Johnny Davis or Ben Mathurin. So I had Davis 7 just because he's been the best. To me, he's been the best player in college basketball. And I think that the shot making is going to translate. I wish we had the opportunity to see him in a more realistic, at sort of analogous context to what his role would be. But, I think that he's a guy that's adaptable enough that he's going to be able to, adjust to being used more off of movement, off the catch. The mid-range ability is incredible. I'm not sure if he's actually 6'5", but he's very physical for a player his size. He's kind of like, if CJ McCollum had a lot more muscle and brawn on him. So I do think that he's going to be a high level, 20 point per game scorer. I'm not sure whether he's an elite 3-point shooter in the NBA, but he's shown that he has range beyond the NBA 3-point line. Defensively, I think that he has the physicality and the competitiveness that he's going to hold up, against perimeter players. So that is my top 7. I had Mathurin 8 for all the reasons that you guys really touched upon. I just think that he's the best movement shooter, but it just the best movement shooter in this draft. I mean, you could kind of quibble with who you think is better as a shooter between him and Jabari.
Sasha Stefanovic.
Wait, who was that guy that I sent you yesterday that plays for Drake?
Oh, I forget his name.
That guy's up there. But yeah, so I mean, for me, the thing with Mathurin is I just don't see the potential as really a like high level scoring option, just because he hasn't really shown the ability to get to the rim out of like consistently, get to the rim on ball out of like the pick and roll, I don't think there's a ton of upside as an isolation scorer. I think that he really has to be either curling off a screen, spotting up off the catch, or attacking a closeout. I just don't really see him creating his own shot, but he's been really good on floaters, which is an interesting development this year. But he doesn't really, he has really good athleticism in transition, but it's like one of those guys that finishing ability, it's like Malik Monk, like it just doesn't come through in the half court. So I think that he's pretty much a guarantee, to be a guy who is going to hit shots at an elite clip, and he's going to shoot over 40% from three. But I just don't see him being a creator. Defensively, he's very slight. I don't think he's 6'7" either. He looks more like, I don't know, 6'4", 6'5" to me.
You've been saying that for so long.
It's so true though. Like, is he the same height as Bryce McGowan's?
You need to go with a measuring tape and settle it once and for all. I love the release point on his shot though.
He gets incredible lift
and incredible ball placement too. So I don't know. I feel like, it doesn't seem to me that it's going to pan out into being a go-to guy, but because of the lift on the shot and the the shooting ability, I don't know. I think things could break the right way, and he could be steal of the draft, even in the mid lottery.
I think he will be a top 10 pick just because of how easily translatable the shooting is.
Can I run my number 10 by you guys? I need to. So what it came down to for me was I decided my 10, it was going to be a bit indulgent and pick an upperclassman great player. And I was going between Agbaji and I was going as well between Juzang. And I ultimately went with Juzang, which I know is not the conventional pick at this point. And I mocked in the late first, I think in most like big mock drafts. And the reason I feel so confident about Juzang is it is the intangible piece, it is the winning piece, and it's also I think he's an elite shooter. And I know he shoots like 37, 38, but the free throw shooting's in the 80s. He takes tough shots, moving shots, and I think the knock against him, which is fair, is that he's not a great defender and that he's not a great athlete, but he actually doesn't have horrible size. It's like 6'7". Even Milo 6'3". No, but he's actually 6'7", and not super thin. And I just feel like it's one of those no-brainer picks in that I think he will be a good NBA player. I just don't see how he's out of the league because I think the shooting's for real. He's not shrinking over the next 2 years. And so I think he will be a valuable role player. And taking a valuable role player at 10 is a win. It is. And so considering everyone else, and I know I'm putting him over Jalen Duren, I'm putting him over Keegan Murray, just because I feel so confident that he will be a valuable NBA player. You can tear it apart. I don't care.
No, I totally believe in the shooting as well. He has a very quick release. He does it off movement. They run a kind of, NBA style actions for him to get into his shots out of both from both the mid range and from three. So I definitely see how it translates. I think that he'll be a solid player, but I guess I'm just not sure about how much value he provides on the ball. And between that and defensively, I think that he's a bit of a one-dimensional player just because he's not going to be he doesn't project as a plus defender or as, much of a passer as well. So I definitely think that, but I think that the value of like movement shooters is underrated by just people who evaluate talent at the NBA level, because it adds a whole nother dynamic to your offense. And it really just the ability to run those actions on the weak side and create diversions and kind of scramble the help defense as you try to create downhill pressure from the strong side. I think that there's so much value in just having guys that can just run around and attract defenders and force mistakes. So I do see how there's value in that. I think that out of the kind of like every year there's like obscure high level movement shooters in the draft that go in the late first and the early to mid second rounds. And I think out of that bunch, Juzang is the most proven just because he's done it at the highest level and he plays for the best team out of any of those guys. So I buy it. I was actually close to, well, first of all, I want to make the case for Jalen Duren because I think that he is probably the player this year whose situation is lowering his draft stock the most, just because he's playing on a team that's been very disappointing. It is dysfunctional offensively and doesn't have someone who can set him up. He's not a post up center. I've seen some sort of potential as a mid-range shooter. I kind of like his mechanics, even though it hasn't translated to actually being effective as a shooter. But I think that there's upside as a pick and pop shooter, passer, hybrid, kind of the way you see it with Robert Williams a bit, even though Williams doesn't have the shot either. But I think it's similar to Robert Williams in that he has this, he had kind of questions about his motor in college, but he has incredible potential as a rim protector. There's not many of those guys in this draft outside of Chet. And I just think that you're not seeing him used the way that he would be as a lob catcher and as a guy that just dives to the rim out of the pick and roll, and can just stand in the dunker spot and just finish off plays if a guard or a slasher is able to penetrate and draw help. Like, he is going to be so effective in that role. And I know that it's offensively, that's an incredibly replaceable skill. There's hundreds of guys that aren't even in the NBA that can provide that value to your offense, but I don't think that there's very many guys that have his ceiling as a shot blocker.
But also, I don't think that it's true that those two skills can be. I mean, really, one skill can be replaced. His pick and roll finishing that easily, not to that extent. He's coordinated. It's not like he doesn't look robotic rolling to the rim. And I totally forgot to mention the point about Memphis's offense as a whole. I mean, Imani really hasn't panned out like we thought. They don't have like a great playmaker who would really bring the best out of him in the pick and roll and, just hanging out in the dunker spot. He's going to be one of the best at doing that at the next level. Him getting close to Rob Williams, I thought that was a pretty good comparison. I think he can get to the level that Rob Williams is at. He's got like 1 or 2 inches on him. He's also long, but I just don't, the notion that like his rim running is just this totally replaceable skill, I don't think is necessarily true.
No, he's just 18-year-old Bismack Biyombo. No, I agree. I think that's
drafted too.
We're seeing it. I mean, you see it with Jared Allen. Like, I think that's I for the longest time thought it was I thought just replace that dude with JaVale McGee, doesn't make a difference. But it's just not the case. Like, he is an unusual athlete. That is evident. But I still don't think it's quite as valuable. Like, I think
that's fair.
Well, it's not common, but it's not rare. Like, Walker Kessler, Mark Williams, like there's like a few guys, but they're not as mobile. So maybe I am convincing myself that maybe I overlooked Duren a bit, but it just sucks that he's on that team. It really sucks. They should let him play a pickup game with CB3, and then we'll assess.
Just throw any center in NBA history on the 2022 Phoenix Suns, and they're going to average like 16 points and 12 rebounds.
Do you not remember Greg Steamsma?
Of course I remember Greg Steamsma, bro.
What did he average like at his best? I forget.
I don't know if he ever played more than 20 minutes in a game.
I remember Tommy Heinsohn used to say he reminded him of Bill Russell.
Well, Tommy Heinsohn also said that Phil Pressey reminded him of like JoJo White.
Oh my God.
R.I.P.
Yeah. Too soon. Guys that were close to making my top 10 but didn't quite cut it. TyTy Washington and Jean Montero. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm guessing it's Jean. So almost like opposites to each other because of the way that TyTy is kind of billed as such an opportunistic scorer and secondary playmaker, where and he done it against high level competition. And I forget I'm blanking on who Kentucky's point guard is this year, but I think TyTy has been kind of like, his playmaking has been obscured to some degree because of the fact that they haven't played him on the ball very much. And the first game that they actually started him at point guard, he broke John Wall's record for assists in a game with 17. He's an NBA level shooter off of movement, off the dribble. He has a very good floater. He's a pretty good athlete. For a guy that's like 6'3", 6'4", and plays the point. I just don't know whether he has a ton of shake and creativity as a scorer, and if he has an advanced enough handle to just get to the rim at will out of the pick and roll, and he settles for a lot of like short jumpers and floaters, which is a little bit disturbing to me if you're looking at him as a lead guard.
Don't you guys find it strange that he's only attempting 3 threes per game? I'm really banking on that number to increase at the next level. I think he's going to take more threes, and he's got really nice mechanics. He shoots well from the line. Nothing crazy. He shoots slightly above average from the line, but he's got good mechanics, and the types of threes that he takes. Again, not all exclusively off movement, but it's not like he's just stationary, spawning up on all his attempts. Maybe I am ready to put AJ Griffin in my top 10. It's just, I wanted to wait to see what he does with a little more playing time, because Duke has recently played him more minutes. They weren't playing him for more than 20 minutes at the start of the season when he came back from his injury. But now he's starting to play more, and the 3-point percentage is just so impressive to me. I didn't expect him to be that good of a shooter.
Just to jump to the other prospect, Montero, I think one of the problems is that he's playing in such a high level, successful league that it's like, no. I understand he was great, and I loved him like when I was before OTE. Which I cannot say enough bad things about. No, but he played for like in the Catalonian 8th tier, and you just can't tell. That's the problem. And I think in the case of Shaedon Sharpe, the unknown is almost to his benefit. But in the case of Montero, it raises so many questions. I don't need to see Montero playing for Purdue to assess him, but I just think the fact that there really is nothing of value to assess him on, besides like some impressive glimpses, makes it problematic. And I'm not sure he's a great shooter. I'm not sure he's efficient. He's small, slight, but he is explosive, or he's a sort of a microwave scorer. But I don't know. Have you seen much from him that you've liked, Milo?
Well, again, pretty much all that I've seen from him is, in glimpses against high school level opposition. Well, not even high school level opposition, literally against high schoolers. He's like 19, 20 playing against literal high school players in a supposedly professional league.
No, he's actually young. He's actually for real a high school age person. Okay. I know, it's crazy.
Well, he looks like a high schooler, which is concerning, but he has that like high pick and roll, get downhill, or like hit threes off the dribble if the defender goes under. Like, he has that classic like modern NBA scoring point guard arsenal. It's a little bit like Darius Garland scoring wise, and in the way that he's a crafty scorer from all 3 levels. Yeah, again, I just can't put him any higher than, I think I have him at like 13. I just can't really get him any higher than that based on the fact that we haven't seen him against, opposition that's notable whatsoever. But I like the style of ball handling and scoring that I see from him. He's definitely a more advanced ball handler. Even in, just what we've seen from him in OTE, he's a more advanced ball handler than I think any of these guys. Right.
I'm curious, and I guess I'll ask Danny. Are there any players that you've seen that have been getting touted or have been rising that you don't see it with?
Oh, I have one. Kendall Brown. He's been getting a ton of hype from just all over the NBA scouting scene, and I guess I understand the inclination to, it's, we were talking about this a little bit before as well, Jake. It's a little bit of scouting inertia where guys have a player in their top 5 coming out of high school, and there's an inclination to like, it's a confirmation bias where all of the good things that you see, because you pretty much only see good things. if that's what you're looking for with Kendall Brown, because he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He really plays to his strengths. He's a good defender. He's incredibly athletic. He is an explosive finisher in transition. He's smart in how he makes himself available for dump off passes in the half court, but he's so limited as an offensive player. There's really no ability to put the ball on the floor and threaten the rim off the dribble at all. He hasn't, I think he's shooting like 1-3 a game or something. Like he does not project as a guy who can space. And at 6'7", 6'8", I don't know how much rim protection you can really expect him to provide. And if you're not, like, no matter how good of an on-ball defender you are, if you're not providing some level of rim protection and you can't space the floor and you're not an on-ball scorer, then what are we doing? I just don't see how that can project as a top 10 pick. I don't even have him in my top 15.
I agree. No, I think that's all true. It's somewhat damning, I think. The next Zaire Smith, I guess, on our hands here.
I actually have the same thought. Like one of these guys that just incredibly athletic wing that can finish above the rim, but like how many of those are you actually getting per game and how replaceable is that? Just because someone posterizes a 7-footer, like that could have just been it's not providing that much incremental value, especially when you pair it with just the limitations as a scorer and a playmaker.
The last thing I wanted to mention was Jaden Hardy. It seems like all of us are not that high on Jaden Hardy, not as high as some of the top websites have him. And I'm curious what gripe you guys have against him.
He's inefficient and he doesn't put pressure on the rim, and he's not a good passer and clearly not a great defender either. So like
he's a bad defender.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I do. Obviously, everyone gets it. Like, it looks good some of the time. Like, it looks really, really good some of the time. But there's just no, you can't look at the body of work and make a good faith argument based off the work, based off like the actual returns that he's a top 10 pick. And that's, maybe I'm being generous in saying top 10, because maybe you could say lottery as well. And it's not like you can make the argument that, oh, he's playing in the G League, the competition is that much greater. And it is clearly, but there's benefits to the spacing of it, to the NBA style of play that Jalen Green took full advantage of, that convinced people, despite some inefficiencies, that Jalen Green was a worthy top 5 pick. Maybe Kuminga's success, but Kuminga's such a different player. And we were speaking about this, Milo and I were speaking about this, but it's really jarring and probably more of a testament to the Warriors culture than anything else, that he so quickly did all of the things that people were, evaluators were begging him to do in realizing his role and playing within himself. But when you're a big, hyper athletic player, that is a much more viable and natural thing to do than if you are a high volume guard. Because what does he do? Like, him playing within his role would be being a 3-and-D wing, because he is okay size for a guard, but that's just not the player he is. Do we have like his open spot up 3 stats? Because even if we do, I bet they're not that impressive.
I don't know what his open spot up 3 stats are. He takes so many of his threes like with the hands in his face, off a hesitation dribble, like off a hang dribble, and just bricks them. Like I think he's shooting like 25% from 3 on the year.
Yeah, it's to the point where, like, is it even a strength? His shot selection is so bad and limiting him so much that even despite, I guess, skill that he would be able to exhibit in a workout or some other condition where he's not being guarded out like 30 feet from the rim. I mean, he's making the decision to shoot those shots. You know, Milo and I always talk about this issue of scalability. He's going to be maximized individually on a bad team. And if he plays on anything but that, he's just not going to have a lot of success. So
I'm not sure he's better than Cam Thomas.
yeah, I don't think he is.
No, I think Cam Thomas is better. I think that like he's the type of player. The thing that really turns me off about him is that he could be so much better if he just played more to his strengths and just like focused more on. I think that there are physical limitations, but like if he just cleaned up his shot selection, focused more on being a distributor, because he does have gravity. Like guys respect his off the dribble scoring ability and his shooting, and he can shoot off of movement. He had like a game winner the other day off of like a curl from the right wing, but he's just so determined to be this type of a player that he's not efficient as that. I really question like the mindset, because I've actually seen like, I don't know if you guys watched like the Mike Schmitz interview.
I knew you were going to mention that.
But you get the sense, and I'm sure that, you know, like I'm you know, I can't comment on like how coachable of a guy he is, but you do get the sense that he really believes that he's the best player on the floor at all times, and that he's earned the right to take those types of shots. And that's just not a mindset that's going to be conducive to success when you're playing next to guys that are better than you, and he's not able to recognize it.
Yeah, Mike literally made a comment about his shot selection being bad. And I forget exactly what he said. Can't quote him word for word, but he was like giving a response to justify it. And he basically implied like, I'm skilled, I have the right to do this, even though it's clearly not optimal for the team's overall effectiveness. I don't know if it's ego. That didn't seem like an appropriate response.
If he's good, this could not age worse, because this is just an evisceration of, if he's like the next Bradley Beal, I think we all have to retire from public life.
I think that you can make an argument that Blake Wesley has better potential as like a secondary scoring option than him.
I've seen Blake Wesley's been rising lately. I don't know. I need to watch more before I articulate my opinion.
I mean, I could talk about him a little bit, but again, microwave. He has better. I think he's 6'5", 6'6", good length. You know, pretty shifty. Getting to his mid-range attack. There's questions about his defensive awareness and kind of engagement, but I just think that he's a player that plays within himself offensively. He can fit within a team concept. He's a better mid-range shooter. The three-point shot has, you know, there's definitely flashes. It can definitely serve to improve, but I don't know. I think I'm actually struggling with how to rank the three Ignite guys that are probably at the top. I mean, obviously, you know, Scoot Henderson for next year's draft, and Michael Foster Jr. is interesting as a late first round steal potential guy. I don't know if you guys have watched much of him, but between Dyson Daniels, Marjon Beauchamp, if you will.
Good job.
But yeah, I think, you know, between Daniels, Marjon, and Hardy, it's difficult to square them because they're such different players, and none of them have proven that they can shoot the three. But they offer such unique skill sets. Daniels is as a kind of complementary pass first combo guard who I like his stroke from three. I think that it has the potential to, you know, for him to be a league average 3-point shooter. I like his passing. He struggles to beat people one-on-one, but he's a very good defender and he has good size and length for his position. I think that he could be a guy that guards, you know, the best player on the other team. And then with Marjon, his athleticism is just so like transcendent, and his ability to fill gaps and score efficiently as like a tertiary option. He's averaging like 16 points a game, 16, 17 points per game on like 61% shooting, playing small forward and without really taking threes. So I think his scoring potential off the ball as like a hybrid wing is really interesting. And the defensive versatility is super intriguing with him. I'm tempted to put him first among the Ignite guys for this year.
I don't know if this is a question, but this is not the kind of draft where it's likely that we're going to get extremely transcendent shot creators. I know, Jake, you're high on Paolo. I have changed my opinion of his passing as the season has gone on. I think he does have potential as a playmaker. He's a really knowledgeable guy, actually, super humble. I watched his interview with Mike Schmitz, and it was just very apparent from watching that he's got a high IQ. He's very knowledgeable. He's not the kind of guy that, would be stubborn to making adjustments. But yeah, I generally don't think this is the kind of draft that, that we're going to find out that there's even one like transcendent, I'm talking like historically transcendent shot creator. And with that said, you realize you have to have reasonable expectations and sort of like compare players according to like the most likely outcome rather than like what we hope is going to happen. I still recognize that there are certain contingencies with Jabari Smith's shot creation, I guess.
I think that's a great way to summarize this draft. At the top, there are not. Okay, I know I made the case for Paolo, but I also see the limitations but those transcendent guys are so rare.
Yeah.
I think we've been getting spoiled lately, to be honest, with recent drafts. I don't know. I love that there's some bigs in contention now, and it seems to be fitting in with a nice trend we're seeing in the NBA back towards some big man relevance. And I'm just excited to see how it shapes up. I mean, this is a great conversation, but I anticipate when we have this conversation, if we have this conversation in a few months, a lot might change. Nothing is locked in at this point. Even Chet at 1 isn't locked in. Paolo has shows a continuing improvement in creation. If Jabari all of a sudden gets hot and starts showing, more off the dribble stuff, that's going to be hard to ignore. And who knows, Shaedon Sharpe might make an appearance, and I think we're going to love what we see if that happens.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see how things kind of, how the dust settles through the remainder of this college season. And it's going to be really interesting to see some of these top prospects actually match up against each other in the tournament. Because with some of these guys, the question is, how do they fare against like true NBA level talent with guys like Johnny Davis, Keegan Murray, I think with Chet to a certain extent because of the physicality, certainly with Jabari and Paolo in terms of how much they can ramp up their offensive volume if their team needs it. Yeah, I echo the sentiment about how it's kind of refreshing to see the resurgence of the big man kind of reinvented in this spacing centric era. And now you have big men that are so skilled as shooters and as ball handlers and more sophisticated as passers that you can't necessarily discount guys just for being 7-footers if they can provide value in the same skill sets that guards do. And I think that skill curve is finally catching up where you have, we're kind of being ushered into an era where all of the big men at the top of their classes have skills that you just would not see 10, 20 years ago. So, we're kind of entering a new era of the big man, which is really interesting to see as big men start to dominate the NBA as well, with Embiid and Jokic and Giannis probably being the top 3 in MVP conversations. Well, yeah, it's been a great conversation. I'm glad that we could all make this happen on this exceptionally snowy Saturday afternoon. So thanks for coming together. And we're certainly going to have to do this again later on in the season when we have more information about all these guys.
Yes, sir. Catch you guys later.
Peace.